Tommy Moore, founder of the Bartitsu Lab, and today I'll be interviewing Duncan McNulty from the Bartitsu and Antagonistics Forum. Hello, Duncan.
Hello. How are you doing?
Really, really well. It's good to see you and your splendid room of music.
Sorry, yes.
I was expecting more kind of steampunky weapons on the wall, kind of sword, canes, magic hats.
That's kind of my garage. My garage has literally a golf caddy with swords sticking out of it that I use for carrying stuff around at events. I do have a pith helmet and things are all there. My top hat are all on display. In fact, my pith helmet is currently sitting on top of Troy, who's my training dummy. Currently has my pith helmet on. So
I never trust people that have appropriate storage for their weapon. I think that is a sign of lunacy. I think most people want to go.
Yeah, most of my weapons are in a bag somewhere from the last time I had them out training.
Yeah, IKEA bags, golf caddies, these are what normal people carry their weapons.
I agree entirely, yeah. I think hockey bags are quite good as well.
Hockey bag, that starts to go towards the professional range, that you start to move to a man of organisation, which is not...
Let's not go that far, no.
Cool. So first question I'd like to run by you is what's your view on Bartitsu? What does kind of Bartitsu mean to you?
Well, originally, Bartitsu to me was a gateway drug. I had a situation where I essentially couldn't afford to get anyone to train me. So the logical thing to do was to start a club and get other people to fund my habit. So I started up doing Bartitsu because there's a very low equipment cost to get involved.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I started, really as a gateway drug to get people hooked, then get them to buy equipment, and then move on to the historical fencing, which is a bit more of my background. So that was really, I suppose, what it started out being to me. Since then, it's become something so much bigger. It's kind of hard to put into words. For me, it was. I trained with a lot of different martial arts over the years, and they were all very prescriptive in what was and wasn't allowed. So any idea of pressure testing against something outside of your own system was very much frowned upon, which meant you got really, really good at dealing with people who did exactly the same things you did. And then you'd meet somebody who, throws a hook and you're like going, this isn't in my system, I'm out, which I didn't think was particularly helpful. So coming across Bartitsu, which was, get in there, try it. If it works, keep it. That mentality really kind of meant a lot to me. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm quite short. And this idea that I was coming in and people like going, oh, well, that would work if you were taller. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not. And I'm never going to be. So again, find the techniques that work from you and make those your techniques and learn them, and make that your style of Bartitsu. So it was that kind of adaptability really appealed to me. So I think Bartitsu is that. It becomes everything to all people. It's such a wide-ranging syllabus and quite happily and willingly steals from other systems when it needs to, that it's so eclectic that everybody can find something in there that works for them, irrelevant of their age, ability, kind of physical ability, previous knowledge. You can make it work for you. And I can't think of any other martial arts that are really that adaptive. Even things like MMA and things, which you think of as being quite eclectic, has become quite rigid in kind of what you learn if you want to be good at MMA.
Yeah.
Whereas Bartitsu just continues to go, yeah, just come in, find what works for you. You're doing Bartitsu. Great.
That's brilliant. And for you, what do you think makes Bartitsu? But is there any identifying features you'd say? At what point does something stop becoming Bartitsu? What do you think are the special things? What holds it together?
Right. I mean, from my point of view, I've always viewed Bartitsu was originally marketed. I'm not going to say created, but certainly it was marketed as being for people who essentially let's go for the spiel that I would normally start on. Victorian London, people are worried about being mugged. people are also very worried because the people that have money tended not to be the ones that were physically fit, because they spent all their day sitting around talking and doing politics and desk jobs, whereas the poor people were hulking boxes around 12 hours a day or whatever, and were built like giant haystacks. So the worry was that these big, strong people would come beat you up because you're small and little, and take your money off them. Take your money away. Yeah, sorry, my words failing me there. So Bartitsu was very much aimed at going, we can take you as you are, and we can teach you to defend yourself against somebody bigger and stronger by using signs to cheat. So I think at any point where Bartitsu starts to move away from self-defense, relatively easy to learn, and techniques that are based on scientific principle, you start to move away from Bartitsu.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people that I don't know if it's a thing that's still going, but for a while there was a lot of what we used to call Krav Maga with boater hats. Where people were going around, dressing up like they were going to the Henley Regatta or something, and doing Krav Maga and claiming it was Bartitsu, and you're like going, no, most of those techniques are lethal. That's not a self-defense system. That's a military killing people system. So for me, that was outside of Bartitsu. I think that there are some of the stuff where I think some of the technicalities of judo, once you get really, really into it and you're looking at the groundwork and you're getting to the some of the techniques where it's just gets really involved and really technical, I think it goes beyond what becomes easy to teach to people. Mm-hmm. So I would say, to me, that's probably stepping outside of Bartitsu.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you imagine the Venn diagram, that has kind of like pugilism, savate, jiu-jitsu, and other stuff. Yeah. It's really that bit where they intersect that we think of as Bartitsu. That's not to say that in your particular Bartitsu, you won't verge towards pugilism because you happen to like punching people, or you might want to take it to groundwork because you've done jiu-jitsu before or whatever. But the core of it, to me, it becomes that simple to teach, simple to teach, but it still becomes hard to master in terms of I'd much rather my students had 5 techniques they were really good at, mm-hmm. rather than 100 techniques they're rubbish at.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to it in a pressure test situation, your brain shuts down and you're not going to be like going, oh, now if I find this particular bit of the wrist and twist it, you're like, no, I'm just going to grab and twist. In the pressure of it, you want techniques that are easy and are going to work. Sorry, I think I'll keep going off topic there.
That's it. And in terms of your specific club, obviously, I look after a club. There's lots of different instructors, and each different Bartitsu club looks a little different. So could you tell us a little bit about your club and its kind of particular approach? What do you envision for your club? What makes yours different and unique to you?
Right. Okay. Well, the way we organise it is one of the things. I picked the words very carefully in our title. Partly, I picked them very carefully so that the anagram became Bath, because I'm a big fan of my 60s Batman. But also, obviously, Bartitsu, and it started out as amateur forum, and I had to lose the amateur part because people kept paying us to go and do talks and presentations. So we ended up changing to Antagonistics because we'll bring you more of the fencing at that point. But one of the important words to me is forum. I'm not standing up as the all-knowing instructor who is imparting my knowledge to other people. I'm more just the one who is insanely obsessed enough to go away and do research every single week, and then turn up and go, this is what I've been looking at. Let's go over the basics again, or whatever needs to be done. But I have no problems, and in fact, I wholeheartedly encourage my students to go out and do their own research and bring their own stuff into the club and teach it. So we've had stuff I would never have thought of doing. Well, sorry, there's some guy outside on a little motorbike that's just... And a second, you'll be gone in a second. Right. So we've had things like police truncheon being brought in by one of our students, based on the kind of Irish New York early police truncheon.
Yeah.
I'd never studied that, but somebody else went away and brought that in. So part of it is very much, it's kind of an eclectic group. We're all researching and bringing stuff in. In terms of what we actually teach, we run a 2-hour class once a week. The first hour will be what we can call our Bartitsu bit, and that normally rotates. So we'll have the first Tuesday will be pugilism, then we'll do savat, then we'll do jiu-jitsu, and then we'll do cane. And that takes us through our 4 main bits every month. And then the other half of our class will be historical fencing, where we focus more on like saber or side sword or something, but I'll not go on too much about that at the minute. So the idea is that everybody can kind of pick up on the basics of each of the 4 styles, and then start experimenting with lots of different bits and going, well, this week this worked for me, this week nothing worked for me. But you start collecting your own personal techniques. Yeah. And then very much at the end of the class, I try to leave as much time as possible for free play. I don't, sparring, whatever you want to call it, but that idea of actually getting up and trying to make a technique work against somebody who doesn't want it to. I mean, you can have it perfectly executed technique, but if it falls apart the first time somebody steps a little bit left, you don't know that technique. Yeah. So that's it. The way we structure it is that we're teaching different things every week, and people find the bits that they like, and then they focus in on training that. They'll do their own research, bring that in, and then everything's basically thrown into the melting pot of sparring and seeing what actually works for you as a person.
And how much do you think your historical fencing influences your particular take on Bartitsu? Would you say your kind of your fencing background plays heavily into that?
I think so. I mean, I prefer weaponry. It's just where I suppose I've come from originally. I mean, although originally I started out doing kung fu, so I've kind of moved all over the place. But I like cane, and I was, I will go to cane. Also, I tend to think about things in terms of fencing. I approach how I think about pugilism, for example. I will think about my lead hand as being like a buckler. Yeah. I can do a punch with it, but I'm much more likely to be using that defensively, looking for an opening to bring my sword in, which is my right cross, Yeah. So it probably does in my head. In terms of how we teach it, it probably doesn't overlap too much, because most of what I'm doing is trying to find ways to get people to understand my understanding of what I've read. Because let's face it, most of this comes from books. So you read a book, you think how it's going to work, you test it out with a few other people and kind of get something that vaguely fits, and then you open that up to a larger group to pressure test that. So I think possibly the main thing that's come from me is my idea of there isn't, or at least there wasn't when I was more involved in HEMA, so much of a sport element. Yeah. And this is where I think I'm very different to probably a lot of other people that are teaching Bartitsu, yourself included, come from a very sport background. Yeah. I don't. I come from a kind of learning background, like more an academic background. So the difference I found really comes to when you're sparring. If you step up against somebody who comes from a sport background in sparring, they want to win. Yeah. Whereas I'm used to, from more of the fencing background, I'm just trying to make techniques work. And I could come out and I've no idea how many times I died or how many times I killed the other guy or who the winner was. I'm just coming out going, that technique worked really well. That one I need to get the movement more fluid to get it to work. And it becomes much more about a learning experience for me rather than the concept of winning. Yeah. So I try to instill that into my students because, partly because I'm selfish and that's the way I think, and I want them to obviously become mini versions of me. That's not true at all, but and also just I think it produces a much healthier attitude to sparring early on, because until people learn control, it's very easy to overdo things in sparring. Yeah,
absolutely. I normally just get people to control by, if they're taking the piss, then they'll do a couple of rounds with me instead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have used those kind of techniques. I mean, one of the things, we don't really have a grading structure as such. Yeah. Essentially, we have not safe to spar and safe to spar are really our 2 classifications. Yeah. We call them initiate and scholar, but that's pretty much what the actual definition is. And normally for someone to move from one to the other, they will have to fight me. Yeah. And I will throw in the weirdest, bizarrest kung fu whatever at them and see how they respond to it.
Yeah.
Stuff they haven't encountered, they've never seen. And if they can kind of hold their own and don't panic, they're safe to spar. The ones that just go, oh, I don't know, so I'm going to rugby tackle him. You're like, you're not thinking about what we've trained anymore. You're just reacting, and that's not safe.
Cool.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about actually was the weapons. I find it quite interesting what people end up being kind of Bartitsu famous for. And I find that kind of you're very, very well known for your weapons. I think Lauren Ireland is very, very well known for her jiu-jitsu and her grappling. And I'm relatively well known for punching and kicking people.
Yes.
But it's quite an interesting way in which the kind of, that's just, by perception or reality, everybody does all of the things, but that just... It seems that you're very well known for your weaponry and your cane, and lots of the requests for things about you are weapon orientated, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it's my strongest area.
Yeah.
It's the one I feel most comfortable with. I mean, I've done some boxing. I've done a fair amount of kickboxing. I've not done a lot of jiu-jitsu, like actual official training. So that's the area I feel kind of weakest in. So, I mean, I can teach standing grappling. I quite like my dirty fighting and my in-close stuff like that. But once it hits the mat and it starts getting technical, I've not trained that in the level that a lot of other people have who are doing Bartitsu.
Yeah.
So it's not my strength. It's not my area. I mean, I'm very lucky that one of the guys who comes to our club is actually years and years and years of Aikido. So he's like, don't worry, I can tell you what you're doing wrong here. That's great to have somebody who can come in and kind of plug that gap. And that's, again, part of that group feel that I'm going for. But yeah, everybody has the things that they are, whether that's specialized at or just the things that, as you said, people pick up that perception, and then that becomes what people ask them to speak on, Yeah. So, I've never been asked to go and speak about boxing, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't quite happily go and do that.
I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was how relevant is it today to learn the weapon skills? So you look at, obviously, a lot of classical Bartitsu is Vinyi and Cunningham. Would you say it's very important for people to still pick up those skills?
I would say it's very important people pick up the transferable skills that those things teach you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm in a situation where I actually need a cane to get around half the time. So for me, it's quite nice to know that if I ever needed to, I actually have a cane and I do actually use that. Most people aren't in that situation, so it's not particularly useful to learn that. But what is important to learn in terms of weaponry is really what that does in terms of measure and range, and understanding that if the other guy is holding a pool cue, you can't just approach him in the same way you would approach him if he was going to go and box with you.
Yeah.
So it's that understanding of what you might be up against that I think is actually quite useful, and that awareness of space and how you get in and get out against somebody who's armed. And also, it never hurts that if there's something to hand, it's the improvised weaponry stuff that picks up to a lot of that. If I'm holding something and a fight breaks out, I've either got to protect it, in which case I'm taking a hand out of the fight. I've got to put it down, which is time out. I've got to drop it, in which case it's on the floor, smashed, whatever. Or I have to use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
And if I can possibly use it as a weapon, that is the best option. We teach students a lot to be able to pick something up and fight with it. One of the things we do every year is what we call a random weapons tournament. And you literally just roll a dice for each hand on a table. And those are the weapons you get. And then you go and spar with them.
That's cool.
And it will be things like a wooden spoon. Right? And yeah, you're laughing. But if you put 2 seconds of thought into it, it's actually a reasonably useful implement in a self-defense situation.
Yeah.
Against an unarmed opponent, not so much for like slapping them around the head in a comedy style, but as a jabbing implement, that can do quite a lot of, not so much damage, but you can control your opponent a lot with that. If you can get that into the ribs or the kidneys, you can make them move wherever you want them to. So there's those kind of things. Being able to use what's around you, I think, is an important skill. And also, you are going to get that time where the other guy's got a pool cue, or heaven forbid, something like a knife. And you have to respond to that. And unless you know what they're likely to do, you're not going to be in a situation to effectively defend against that.
I still get people talk to me how much they really enjoyed your flexible weapons of Bartitsu. Everybody remembers the belt. Everybody loves the belt and the belt simulators.
The belt is one of those things that looks really flashy. And if you try and use it in a controlled, striking way, it's rubbish. Yeah. Everybody wants it to be like Jackie Chan with a horseshoe tied on a bit of rope and shooting it across the room and hitting people in the face and stuff. And it just doesn't work like that. It's a flail. And really all you can do is build up this speed in this space that you control this area between you and your opponent that's going to hurt them to come through it, and hope they're not stupid enough to take that. But yeah, obviously the rest of it is then just controlling it so you don't hit yourself, because that's a very, very embarrassing situation. So yeah, no, I mean, I do like a lot of the flexible weapons, and they're useful to learn. The belt is good because it's another one of those ones that it kind of fills that same niche that Kane did at the time, in terms that most people have one. Yeah. It's not thought of as a weapon. Yeah, unless you've got like a giant buckle on it or something. A bouncer's probably not going to take your belt off you.
Yeah.
So it is something you can have readily to hand, provided your trousers can stay up if you take your belt off. You have something that you can use. And, there's different ways you can use it as well. If you're not so much in the space, or you don't have the dexterity to be using it as a long weapon, you can use it as things like the Scuttlers did, where you just wrap it round, so you've just got the buckle sitting across your knuckles, and it becomes a relatively handy knuckle duster.
Yeah.
Even a relatively small metal buckle will add an extra good wallop if you punch somebody in the side of the head with it.
That is true. And in terms of, we teach Bartitsu, which is about as niche as you can bloody well get with martial arts. So in your opinion, what do you think? Do you think Bartitsu can grow, and what do you think is necessary to make it grow, or should it grow?
Well, yeah, I think Bartitsu's really spent the last probably 15, 20 years trying to work out what it is. It started out very much with people finding odd references and building it together, a very academic program, and then people taking that out and actually teaching it as a martial art. And nobody was quite sure whether it was a martial arts curiosity, whether it was a performance piece, or whether it was a serious martial art. And I think it gained a lot of popularity. A lot of people got very into the idea of it, but not necessarily the actual material. I think we've kind of gone over that peak, and now the interest is starting to dip down a bit in terms of the general public.
Yeah,
I think it's less in the media and stuff than it was. When we had things like Sherlock Holmes, and it cropped up in a few sitcoms and things, even it was cropping up in. But I think what you're starting to see now is the people that are left with it are starting to really develop it as a martial art, both as an academic exercise and as a genuine form of self-defense. And I think that's really finding its identity with the people that are teaching it now. So I think it'll probably die a little bit more, and then it'll start to pick up again as people start to see it for what it really is, which is simple and effective self-defense.
Yeah.
And I think that's really going to be where it stays within that niche. If somebody wants to go and do MMA fighting, don't learn Bartitsu. That's not what you need to go into the octagon and win. If you want to join the special forces and go around the world killing people, it's not the martial art for that. If you are the everyday guy who can't spend 5 hours a day in the gym, and you want something that's going to teach you how to throw a punch and not get hit, it's ideally situated for that. It is specifically written and designed for that niche market. And that's not to say that a lot of the people that train it aren't very physical, such as yourself, or very skilled in other different arts and things. But you don't have to be to do Bartitsu.
Yeah.
And I think that really opens it up. I've certainly had situations where I've essentially been turned away from martial arts groups because, go and hit the gym, lose some weight, and then maybe we'll talk about teaching you some stuff. And so in the end, a lot of the students that come to me are people who've had that similar kind of experience, where they've essentially been drummed out of other martial arts groups, or have just felt too intimidated to even go in the first place. I don't have a six pack. I'm not 7 foot tall, and it's like, yeah, great. come and train Bartitsu. We'll find the techniques that work for you, and you can go at your own pace. Nobody's going to hassle you about a lot of the stuff that kind of becomes core for if you want to win fights. If you want to go into like sports boxing or something, you need that level of physicality. You don't for self-defense Bartitsu.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where it's going to grow in that in that market of opening itself up for people who can't or don't have the time or ability for other more complex martial arts. There's always going to be Bartitsu. If you want self-defense, there will always be Bartitsu. And it has a nice little story behind it that just makes it a little bit different.
Yeah.
The biggest worry I have, and I don't know if this might be something you want to cut out. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. But there's a certain time I've met certain people who are, let's say, over nationalistic, who latch onto Bartitsu because it's British.
I think I know of whom you speak.
And, my only worry is that if it becomes the British martial art, that it can be attached to a lot of the wrong connotations. I mean, especially when you look at it, it's Japanese jiu-jitsu, French savate. Vignay was French, I think, who spent Swiss. None of this is really that British, but other than possibly taking things that aren't ours and saying they are. So my slight worry is that kind of nationalistic front group getting hold of it. Yeah. The other thing I think that could potentially kill it is the idea of, I've seen a couple of groups trying to do it where they try and kind of like formulate it.
Yeah.
They create, I don't even know if it's going, but I'm sure there was like the UK Alliance or something, Bartitsu Alliance or something at one point, which is basically sign up and we'll let you do gradings and you can have belts and you pay us and we set your syllabus for you. And, and I'm like going, no, what you're doing at that point is streamlining everything or limiting everything. Yeah. And normally the people that want to set up an organization like that aren't doing it for the good of the sport. They're doing it, or the martial art, they're doing it for the good of their ego or the good of their bank balance.
Yeah.
Neither of these are things that I think should be celebrated. So instead, I would much rather it remains, as I think James said the other day, an open source martial art. It's a very good way of describing it.
Yeah, I think as fiercely independent fiefdoms that all join forces and play with each other, it's a much better thing.
Yes, I mean, because that's the nice thing. It's when I always remember when I started training, I got a lot of my stuff from books and videos and things. And I remember I went to one of the I think it was a Bartitsu Con, or I can't remember what it was actually called, run by Tony Wolfe up in kind of Northumberland. And I remember going and kind of being like, please just let something I've done look like vaguely something they're doing. Please let some. And I actually turned up, and actually most of it was pretty much the same. But I was like, that was the first time I was introduced to shillelagh.
Yeah.
And I'd never thought of that as being a Bartitsu thing. But when it was explained, I'm like, no, this makes sense, and it fits nicely into what we're doing. That's maybe something I should look at more. When I've come down and done the Bartitsu cons with you, some of the kind of pugilism stuff, I'd never really looked at Monterrey.
Yeah.
As a boxing style. I looked at his cane work and I wasn't too impressed by it, so I kind of went, nah, I won't bother. And then I remember you doing a class on it, and I'm kind of going, oh no, there's some merit there. I should go back and relook at that. So with that ability for people to, as you said, have their own little fiefdoms and look at their own interests, when we come together and cross-pollinate those, we're actually able to kind of, it helps in that sifting process of the rubbish just kind of gets drifted out or kept in as a joke. I remember a wonderful how to approach a dog from a jiu-jitsu book.
Yes.
Do you know the one I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, get down on your hands and knees and put a coat over your head and approach making growling noises. Yeah, it's a joke, but sadly it was actually written in a proper manual. So the stuff that's rubbish gets sifted out, and the good stuff gets kept and passed from group to group. And I think that's only going to make the art stronger overall.
And in terms of yourself and your club, is there anything you're specifically working on right now? Are there any areas you're investigating or playing with?
I mean, there's always bits and pieces. For me, at the minute, I'm still very much looking at the because cane, obviously, as you may have gathered and as you've pointed out, is one of my real pet hobbies. Is really looking at the integration of different cane styles.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm still experimenting with, ways of switching from one to the other. Also getting better at switching from one side of the body to the other as it's going. So really, that's kind of a body of work that I'm looking at, but I suspect that will take me the rest of my life and beyond to get any level of competence with it. In terms of that, we recently moved the group, and then obviously we've had this break. So I suspect going back will be kind of back to basics. Let's go back and actually look at how to throw a punch again and make sure we've got it absolutely right. So I suspect we'll be going back to that. But I know that other members of my group, one guy has a fascination with German bayonet style.
Okay.
Which is a way of almost half swording with a pool cue.
Okay.
The best way of describing it, which is interesting. He's also the same guy who was doing the truncheon stuff. So, it's nice to know that kind of stuff's coming through. But yeah, personally for me, it's cane, but then I really need to move away from that and get back to some pugilism. Okay. Hopefully, once we're over all of this lockdown and all the rest of it, one of the things I'm hoping to do is actually get myself back to a boxing club and get back to used to actually, getting punched in the face and getting in the ring, because you get soft after a while. And I need someone to beat some toughness back into me. So that's probably going to be my next project personally.
And finally, just as a kind of a last question, what piece of advice would you give to listeners for those just starting out, whether they have access to a Bartitsu club or they don't? So, whether they want to start something up or whether they, what advice would you give to people that are interested and want to get started?
I would say, yeah, it's great. Just do it. There is so much available. There's some really good books. I mean, you can't go wrong. The Bartitsu Compendiums written by Tony Wolff, absolutely brilliant. You can make your way through all of those. You can go online and find period jiu-jitsu, period boxing, period savate. All of those kind of manuals are kind of PDFs are online. I've reason to believe there's going to be another Bartitsu book hitting the shelves shortly. Is that right?
There will be indeed.
Which I am sure will take pride place amongst my collection as well. So no, but those sources are out there. So even if you can't get access to somebody who's training you, those things are there. There's also a whole load of stuff on YouTube and on Facebook. I mean, I've been doing these 1-hour sessions for the last 12 weeks now. So that's 12 hours of Bartitsu related material online. And I know obviously you've been doing stuff as well. Covers a lot of different stuff, including some of the straight razor stuff and things I love. So that material's there. So there's nothing to stop you going out and learning all of the stuff.
Yeah.
The difference is then you need to find somebody else who's obsessed enough to learn it as well, and then try and make it work. Mm-hmm. And only then by doing that kind of pressure testing, and you find stuff where you just go, no, that's rubbish. But again, if there's a couple of you, if there's two of you, you can start training Bartitsu at that next level. The other things I would say is, if you're ever stuck or you don't know, contact somebody who is doing Bartitsu. I mean, I'm sure you're the same as me. If somebody drops an email into my inbox that says, I'm thinking of getting into Bartitsu, I'm really curious about this, that, and the other, where would you suggest I start? They're going to get a 10-page email back because I'm just so excited somebody's interested in my hobby. So there are several people, and I know you're interviewing quite a few of them now. There's the main Bartitsu Society page, I think, has quite a lot of people listed out on them. Contact people and ask questions. If they can't be there physically, it's never been easier to be somewhere virtually.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to advocate learning classes over the internet or anything like that. I don't think that works. But getting correction, help, little bits of tuition and things has never been easier to do. So make use of the people who are there and already obsessed with this. Make use of the resources that are there, and then just start training. If you can find a group, great, because then you get insurance and lots of other nice little benefits. But if you can't, just take it slow, be careful, be safe, and just practice some of it, and you'll find that you can actually pick up the basics of Bartitsu relatively easy. So really the only barrier stopping you is any kind of belief you have that you can't do it.
And now for just a little bit of a chance to kind of plug your club. If people are interested, where can they find you and where can they find out more and potentially join you?
Right, if anybody is interested in joining us, we meet in the Prohibition Cabaret Bar in their upstairs function room on a Tuesday evening from 7 till 9, and that's in the centre of Newcastle, literally about a 2-minute walk from Central Station. Obviously, we're not there at the minute, but we'll hopefully be back there once the lockdown's over. If anybody's looking for us, Bartitsu and Antagonistics Forum, we have Facebook page under that name. Obviously, we have a web page as well, which is under that. I think it's Bartitsu. I'm trying to remember now. Bartitsu.wordpress.com or something. Terrible with remembering my own publicity stuff. But if you search Bartitsu and Antagonistics, we will crop up. So you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on. We've got a YouTube channel. You can always email us. In fact, I think my personal mobile number is on that website if you want to find it. So there's always ways to contact us, and you're always welcome to come along and train with us. I do also have a couple of semi kind of satellite groups operating. So if you and a few others are interested, I'm always willing to travel and spend a weekend with you and get you sorted out so that you can start your own little study groups with a little bit more structure than just finding everything yourself. So if anybody is kind of interested in that kind of thing as well, get in touch with me. I'm always willing to try and help in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. This has been really cool. I always love your stuff. I always watch your videos. I think it's great stuff. So cheers. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tommy.